All right, there we go. Good morning, Russ.
Good morning. Good morning.
Thanks for joining me today. We are here to talk about how Mirimichi Green specifically helps or works with parks and rec departments around the country to manage everything from fields and turf to runoff sensitive areas.
Right.
Tell me about our deep experience with parks and rec.
Well, it really kind of goes back to the beginning, right here at home. But Parks and Rec, I have another company that we started 20 years ago to get ahead of all the regulations and using compost and organics to stabilize, big projects, DOT projects, housing developments. And Parks and Rec, when we started Mirimichi Green, we're like, we need to solve a solution for these parks and recs. I mean, there's the statistic that came out like 10 years ago that the average park had 5% organics in their topsoil. Now it's like 2%. So they're all fighting across the country, throwing more fertilizer on it and more chemicals, and they're depleting their resources. And it's a vicious cycle. So from day one, we decided to approach some of the larger Parks and Rec, and our local Parks and Rec here, Wrightsville Beach, tough soils, a lot of traffic in the summer, and help them solve that problem at an affordable rate. Because, they're just tearing up these parks and rec, these kids, the community wants to use them. They need to be in good shape, throughout the summer, into the fall, even in early spring. Early green up is a big thing. And how do we do that without spending too much labor and too much of the budget to get that accomplished? So we set out from day one to help Parks and Recs, solve those problems.
So go deeper on those problems. So you're talking about traffic a lot. So clearly we mean compaction. We mean wear. But tell me more specifically, when is that the number one thing when we have somebody calling in from a Parks and Rec department that they have a compaction issue they can't solve, or is it more nuanced than that? There's lots of different things going on typically.
Yeah, obviously, compaction's the issue. It's just wear and tear. And compaction can be one thing. One is you got crews using fertilizer, they're putting too much out or not enough, or it's hard to water everywhere. So there's kind of a group of issues going on there. And I'll just give you our first example. I think we'll kind of sum it up a little bit. It's here at Wrightsville Beach. When we moved here, we rented right across from the sports fields here at Wrightsville Beach. And there's a dirt track right in the middle of the field every year by, late May. And everybody's like, oh my God, we got, flag football, and we got soccer, and we got frisbee throwing, and they're going, what do we do?
We got
So
4 months left, and we got nothing but dirt.
Right. So close off the area, and everybody's, complaining. So we make a soil amendment that is pretty phenomenal. You can buy it in a loose form. It looks like compost. It's let's say compost on steroids, because what we got around is we got rid of all the filler and added biology in some cases, and added a carbon that doesn't compress. It helps that compaction issue. And we said, hey, listen, just we'll donate it, and we put it down the middle of the field. And lo and behold, there literally has not been a patch like that since then, from 17 years ago. Now they do make 2 applications a year, and that's something that's very important, to keep it up. I mean, you can go into a deep root zone, project like we do, building a putting green. But once we started putting this organic out, that's quick uptake, compaction resistant, and then the plants started getting, more nutrients instead of just nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash. So they became actually a healthy plant. Because these Parks and Rec, they've done their research on what's the best turf to use. I mean, these guys are good. We're just helping that root zone, that platform for them to perform what they do. And that's what they're, it's just beyond what their tools are to give a good base for them to perform. And the same's going on over in Newport Beach, California. So we decided to go, okay, I'll go to California where it's arid, and go to Irvine and go to Newport where there are 2 subclimates, and we get the same results. And one that we're most proud of on the East Coast is Palm Beach County. Here you got some of the best, well, Newport too. You've got some of the, most prestigious people in the country, and they demand the parks to be healthy and perform. And I love this. At the end of the first year of our first park in Palm Beach, I get a call, and they say, hey, Russ, we got like 10 or 15 acres here, and we only need like 4 pallets of new sod at the end of the season to repair versus 2 to 3 truckloads on average every year. And we did that by just, really one big application at the beginning of the season that lasted through the summer. So that's, saving on labor. We're saving on repairs. We're not using a bunch of chemicals. The plants are healthier. They're fighting off disease because they're getting all the micronutrients they need. And it turned out really well. And I'd like just to add one thing to this, if you're listening, if you're a park manager or whatever. Okay, a lot of these people have gone to, well, just, we'll fortify the soils with all this compost and organics. Well, at a risk, because, Kyle, I mean, you've worked with the National Compost Council. The pHs are going up. There are issues. We have a low pH, which offsets that. Plus, they put so much. And if you get into a rainy type of area season, then the soils get soggy and they don't hold enough air. The carbon we put in there, the crystallized carbon, is to keep it aerobic even during wet times. But if you put too much, and we learned that on doing 100, 200, 300 acre compost seeding jobs on DOT projects, that too much of a good thing can be bad. And so anyhow, there's a balance there, but we're here to help you. If you're a park and Rex manager and you have a dog park or you have a soccer field or you have a sensitive water zone. I mean, we've helped, in PGA courses, solve runoff issues into ponds, to actually eliminate algae blooms because the carbon naturally filters out those contaminants, even though it will let the nutrients go to the plant. So that in a whole, that's what we're doing.
So I heard you mention some pretty big names and some pretty expensive places. So if I'm a Parks and Rec manager in Middle America, am I priced out? Should I bother calling Mirimichi Green, or do you have something for me in that case as well?
Well, that's a good point, Kyle. We talked about that a lot. We went to these parks first because we knew that they had a budget to try new things, period. And they're large, and and they're open for ideas. But no, I mean, it's not cost prohibitive. It may be cost prohibitive if you want to do a 10 inch or 12-inch root zone, 5% of, Mirimichi's CarbonizPN or Essential G or something like that. But, the fact is that you don't have to, we're talking 20 pounds per thousand and as little as 10 pounds per thousand, which is really very, very cost affordable. You take out one labor episode of not having to follow up 4 times during the summer, and you've paid for it. So it's very affordable. And now we have the distribution, all across the country. So we've solved that problem.
So if I call you, you're gonna help me break down these costs, understand what I'm looking at in terms of product, but also help me calculate potential labor savings, potential water savings, potential
Correct.
Fertilizer and irrigation and pesticides, how it all kind of plays together. That's why we want Parks and Rec folks to call in and talk to a member of our team is to figure out how it looks holistically as part of a master plan.
Right. And you have to look at the life cycle cost, and you have to and what we did, I look out with developers, 5 years, 10 years. If I can cut out labor in a layout area, or I can cut out an application or a reseeding an area, the cost of manpower to move back out, the cost of dealing with the complaints. If you can put those into a formula, you can really see you can save money down the road. But what we have found out with most organizations, hey, Russ, I got a budget for this year and I got to figure that out. And we're here to help you with that, to figure that out. A lot of people don't even still today, calculate the organic, the nutrient levels that are in our soil amendment. Most soil amendments don't come with a nutrient level. And the organics we use are just packed full of micronutrients. And if you got the right pH and the right Savita rating, you're going to have, a lot more uptake with less fertilizer. And so you got to look at that. And we have enough examples now to give referrals, to give examples, because for the first 5 or 6 years it was like, okay, I'll believe it when I see it. And now we have plenty of that to show people now, all the way from the NFL down to Beazer Homes or whatever it may be, Wrightsville Beach, Parks and Rec.
I want to follow up on something you said that piqued my interest a little bit, and it's I'd love for, we use premium composts, around the country as part of our part of the Mirimichi Green product mix. But you said something that I'd like you to finish this statement. The challenge with many composts around the country today and in the near future, you mentioned pH, you mentioned that. I'd love you to start that phrase. The challenge with using raw compost, in many cases.
Well, yeah, raw compost is all compost are not equal. And when I started a company, when we became the largest compost feeding company in the country, we found out very quickly that a pile of compost over here is not the same as the compost over there. Most of them aren't broken down. It takes too much energy to break it down to a very fine, mature carbon to nitrogen ratio, for example. What we have a unique ability to bring that cost of getting the organics to that level. We have a unusual process and capability to get that done. And that takes that, so in other words, it's more compact. So across the country, most compost, it still has a lot of, material that hasn't broken down. I mean, you can just pick it up. You can see little pieces of wood in it, and you can see little, a lot of stuff that has not broken down. So you have to get past that point and get it to a point where the carbon nitrate, is 12 to 1. I mean, you've got to get that. The average compost is 24 to 1. Wheat straw is like 40 to 1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. So that when it gets really low, it's already broken down. It's not robbing for anything. It doesn't have to break down anymore. And then it's just food. And that's where we've been able to get our products just because of our process and our resources in our area.
You also mentioned sort of a concern about rising pH. I assume that means right. even on composts that are well matured and broken down, you're seeing, based on the inputs available and the feedstocks that are going into these, you're seeing the average pH rising.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think worm castings is a good example. I mean, I love worm castings. The problem is it's just not dynamic enough to be as suitable for a growing media in its own right. Some of the best horticulturists love it. It's got a carbon, it's got some nutrients and micronutrients, but just it doesn't have the broad spectrum, but it fills a good part. And our product mimics a lot of what worm castings have, but you really need a bulk, a wider spectrum. It's the inputs. Down in Florida and south, you get palm fronds, and that raises the pH quickly. Up here where we are, you use peanut husk, and you've got other inputs and corn husk and so forth, and that raises the pH. So you really got to be careful of what the inputs are, because that across the country, there's no doubt, and you've worked with the National Composting Council, and it's just it's getting up there to 7.2, and you add some fertilizers to it and management of it. I mean, it shoots up above that 7.5, which is the high level. You're getting very alkaline, and you need it more acidic. So we started at the 6.1, 6.2 level, which is consistent for really since day one. And that's not by adding additives. That's just inherent in the product. Because let me give you a good example. You can go buy a lot of potting soil. You don't have the optimum pH, but it's gotten there by line. Well, 6 months to 18 months out, you have to recheck it, because that is a temporary state in which those organics are in.
One of the claims I've seen on the flagship soil amendment, CarbonizPN, is that it's 10 times more effective than compost. Right. And that number comes from the recommended application rate for top dressing of compost versus CarbonizPN. So if you look at how much we recommend for either an install, a sod install, an establishment rate versus a maintenance rate, the rate is about 10 times less than a compost. So as we're talking to Parks and Rec, as we're talking about folks, give us a little bit more on, for folks that are used to using compost, maybe they've been priced out, maybe it's a lot of labor. Talk about what that means in terms of just the fact that we are spreading we're recommending in many cases 10 times less volume of material. How are we getting performance and putting out so much less material?
Well, one reason, if you put a lot of compost out, one of the things is hard to put a finger on is that, it's staying aerobic. you get a lot of compost and good compost, it gets compacted and it can become anaerobic really quickly. So that defeats having too much compost. You put some compaction on it. If it's not really distributed really well at 5% in the soil, it's going to become too compacted, and it's going to go from aerobic to anaerobic. So it just cannot produce. It cannot, transfer nutrients to a plant. So that's one factor. Another factor is, just the bulk density of the active ingredients in it. You take a pile of compost, put it in your yard, let it sit for 2 or 3 years. It gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And then when it gets real small, that's our product. And if you just use organics alone, that in the right situation would be too compacted. So then we add our crystallized carbon, which is in soil has the compression resistance equal to sand. So you put that with it, which has air pockets in it. It keeps it inherently aerobic. And so it doesn't become anaerobic.
Wow.
And it stays productive. And one way to test some of this is a Savita rating, is the ability for that to uptake nutrients to your plant. I mean, you can, as a farmer, if I have a 3 Savita rating in my soil, then that's the respiration rate of nutrients getting to a plant. That it may take 4 or 5, it only uptakes like 20 pounds of nitrogen per acre. Well, if you can get that Savita rate up to 5, you can get 100 pounds of nitrogen in the same soil to that plant. Well, we register at a 7. So, that's much higher. And then you take out the risk of compaction, and then you have the broad spectrum of nutrients. It's just something that a formula that we came up with that works very well.
I love that answer. You keep talking about Solvita rating. I'd love to hear more about that. I basically I think of a Solvita. It's a fancy soil test, right?
It is. Yeah.
What is it? Is it measuring respiration of the plants or the microbes, the biology in the soil that are living, breathing organisms and giving off gas? Tell me more about that, because the reality is I think. We like to reference soil tests, but not nearly as many people are going to do soil tests as we'd like. We'd like everybody to do a soil test. Not going to happen, right? So first of all, tell me how it works so that I can understand what's happening in the soil. But also, if I do want a Solvita test, how do I go about getting one?
Well, I think I may take a different angle at answering that question. When you evaluate, organics are good. It's just, if we look at chemical fertilizers, nitrogen, and so forth, we have ways to test that. Is it a higher pH, low pH? We need to do that with organics. We need to have different ways of going in and go, what am I really buying and what am I really using? One way is a pH, right? And you can see what that is. What is the nutrient content? That's another one. What's my carbon to nitrogen ratio, which a lot of people think that's kind of the end game. And then Savita rating is just another angle to be able to tell how it's feeding the biology in the soil. That's what kind of gets it going, and the uptake to the plant. If I can measure another measure of what my soil Savita rating is the ability to feed microbes and biology and then transport nutrients up to that plant. And it's just another angle that we're trying to let the industry know, that you have to come at it from several areas to know what you're doing. And that's when we're speccing in a job or comparing. You have to look at these things, because we get a company or I get another input and say, hey, it's a better input. Well, how is it going to affect my uptake? How's it going to affect the nutrient level? How's it going to affect the pH? How is it going to affect the carbon to nitrogen ratio? Because a carbon nitrogen of 18 to 1 or 24 to 1 may be perfect for the plant. Well, if I'm sitting higher than that, I need a product that's lower than that to bring the average down. So a lot of people, I buy a compost or organic. This is great for growing media. But what happens when you blend that in with something that isn't? The average is still out of the range. So you really have to come at it. What we do is we just have these benchmarks, and that's what you do in professional specifications. That's how you have ASTM, testing, is that you have to hit it from several different areas, because you can get really fooled in one area if you're not careful.
You open the door sort of on pH and averaging, and obviously that's how large sort of agronomic inputs work. In theory, I don't like pH. I add a bunch of lime or add a bunch of gypsum, large volumes. And as I understand it, that's the whole point is now my average pH, I'm going to blend that together volumetrically, and my average pH is going to end up where I want it.
Right. Right.
You're, with a lot of your products, you're not putting down these large volumes, but you're still having a meaningful impact on pH. And that has to do, I understand, with sort of the buffering ability of these inputs. So tell me the difference. How do I think about pH in terms of something that brings neutralizes and buffers pH versus something where I'm adding a large volume of material so that I can just shift the average? First of all, am I thinking about the way this works correctly, or am I off base? I'm not sure.
That's a big question, and I don't know if I could answer that emphatically, but I will do know I came from a different angle on that, and because I think we can get really in the weeds if we start looking at that, because people say, "Hey, I have a maintenance program, and I'll just add this annually, and that's fine. I'm used to doing that." But we started off. I was an earth science major, family in big ag, and we started using carbon early in the '60s, and bat guano, was actually blended in eastern North Carolina with synthetic fertilizers, and they realized there's just better uptake, and so. But what's interesting is I was working in the Abbotsford Research Center, which had a division on vegetation around the world, and we started studying soils and how does that plant survive, in this horrible environment, and in only 2 weeks a year it can actually grow. The plants come alive, they flower, and then all of a sudden the freeze comes on, or too wet, whatever. And what's going on there? And we realized that there was flecks of real stable carbon in those soils. And regardless of the pH, which is around that flake, it still held nutrients, biology that could feed that plant in that extreme area, when every other element around it was saying, don't grow, don't survive. You've been dormant too long. And lo and behold, when the situation, the environment got right, plants proliferated. And so when it comes back to pH, Kyle, that their university is trying to figure this out right now. And one word is biochar. They call it crystallized carbon. But the fact is that it will hold nutrients, and biology can go to sleep in that carbon, during these off times when the plant, it's not good for the plant to grow. And when it comes, it miraculously will let the nutrients, regardless of the pH around it, it'll let those nutrients. And over time, actually, the soil becomes the medium pH, a good center pH for the soil around it. And that's how the earth rejuvenates its soils.
Got it. So this is a question I've had for a long time. So I love that answer. So what I think I heard is, you're not able to change the pH of the entire soil, because that's a volume thing. Instead, we're relying on these little pockets of ideal pH. Based on the biochar, so that the roots are able to find these pockets distributed throughout the soil, uptake the nutrients, respirate, grow, change, and the more they do that, the more the pH moderates throughout the soil profile.
Right.
So we're almost seeding pH among other things. We're seeding biology, we're seeding pH, and we're letting it grow as the soil becomes healthier and healthier.
Right. And it's long lasting. The half-life of what those specs are doing aren't so minimal that it's persistence for over, longer than a lifetime. We start throwing that 300 half-life, 300, 600 years, people's eyes just glaze over. But that's literally what's going on. So, it is amazing. And we're mimicking nature. That's a big thing. Is to mimic what nature's doing. That's what we're doing. We're doing it in a very efficient way. That's productive way, and how to take all this and bring it into your daily guy out there managing parks and rec, or sensitive area around wetlands where you can't put too much fertilizer, but you still need growth. How do you get there quickly? And that's what we're doing. We're doing what it takes years and years and years of natural environment to do.
I see that we've come up on the time we had scheduled today, so I'd love to conclude with one final question, which is, what can I expect? If I'm a Parks and Rec guy, you've said something that interests me. What should I do, and what can I expect? Should I browse the website? Should I call in to get on with a member of the team and book a call? And if I do that, am I planning for years ahead? Am I expecting that we'll come up with something that I can be implementing later this season or next season. Tell me sort of ideal next steps if for anybody in the Parks and Rec community that is interested in learning more about some of the things you've talked about here today.
Well, first of all, you can always reach out to mirimichigreen.com, and we would love to talk to you. Please, if you're a park manager, contact us. I personally, would love to talk to you. We do have reps that will talk to you as well, and kind of help guide you. Look at, like, kind of screen your situation. And then we have a network of distributors out there, and they have outside sales managers for larger deals. For small ones, they have branches and people in there can ask questions. But the further down the line you go, you may not get that total embodying, kind of strategy going on. But no, we're here to help you and to solve these problems. And to end it, I just have to, my kudos go out to Palm Beach County, working with those guys. They were frustrated, and they're hearing so much input from a lot of people, and they heard about some work we were doing down at the famous golf course and invited us up and say, listen, here's a park. What do? We need to we can't go another year with problems. So they reached out, and we got on the phone and started looking. Then we did a visit, and we said, how do we incorporate this? And one thing that helps us when you talk to the home office is that we've had the experience and resources of using big equipment. If you're doing if you can get your tractor out there and a big time spreader that can move bulk, we can help you, advise you, and we've seen a lot of different types of pieces of equipment. So we'll help you. Do you have in shop what it takes to do maybe a big project? And then, all the way down to the smaller projects, just helping landscapers like we have across the country, saying, hey, what tools are you using? And maybe you need to modify something, or maybe you have it using this distributor, but this other distributor keeps this in stock for you. So we just help you implement that strategy faster.
Love it. Well, Russ Britton, CEO of Mirimichi Green, appreciate your time today talking about Parks and Rec. See you next time.
All right, you too.